Welcome, everybody. My name is David Kramer, and I am the director of the library at the Jewish Theological Seminary. We enjoy our privilege as sponsors of book talks throughout the year, and I'm very, very happy to say that this is our final one for this year. I'm not happy because it's the final one. I'm happy because it's such a fascinating book to discuss, and I hope that this will offer a new horizon of reading to many of you who may not know Dana yet, may not know the author yet, or her fiction. So I'm going to let you, do the search in our promotion. You saw biographical material. If you want to know more, I'll let you go to Dana's website, which includes a lot of information. I'm going to begin with just some personal reflection. After our conversation yesterday, Dana, yesterday was, I guess, when we met for the first time, I was reflecting on what we had said to one another and what this book represents as part of a book series at JTS. Our books are often either books written by faculty or friends on Jewish history, on Jewish religion. We certainly have brought in Israeli authors, both of fiction and nonfiction. But as you said to me, this book is a little bit different than what we might expect from a book that's been, part of the book series for the library of the Jewish Theological Seminary in ways that we'll make clear. After we had that conversation, though, it occurred to me that actually this is of extraordinary interest to our audiences. In certain ways, much of the way it communicates, and I know I didn't say this to you yesterday, and you may or may not take it up as you go ahead, but much of the way it communicates is in what it doesn't say or what it doesn't identify. I even pick that up in the name. Where I am, right, is most assuredly about place, where. Right? But when you say where I am, and the English title is a direct translation of the Hebrew, it also implies where I am not. And that needs to be part of the conversation as well. So I could, I could say more, but people aren't here to listen to me. They're here to listen to you. I'm going to spotlight you. You'll begin, tell people a little bit about the book, its narrative. And I know that you've got a particular section that you'd like to read to share. If you want to do that at the beginning, if that's your intention, you'll let me know. And then we'll go on to conversation. Okay, so let me spotlight you. There you are. Dana.
Thank you, David, for the spotlight and for inviting me. I'm very, very excited to be here and speak about my novel today with you. And I'm looking forward to the conversation afterwards. Before we get into this very important issue that you brought up about the book essence, as I perceive it also, where I am, which is almost can end with a question mark, where I am. And I think it is a question that really, I don't know if the hunt would be the correct word, but that accompanies the Jewish, the Jewish identity, the Jewish people from the beginning, where I am. Judaism is all about being a nomadic people and in the search of a place. And so before I get into the question of the absence, where is Israel being mentioned? Does where I am, is it a Jewish novel or is it not? Let me tell to all of you that joined us today a little bit about the novel. What is the novel about? The novel, in a very from the up, we can say it is about an Israeli woman named Reut, which in Hebrew means friendship. And Reut is in her early 40s, and she had been living in Paris for about 20 years with a husband named Jean-Claude, who grew up Catholic, then became a declared existentialist, yes, and with her son, Julian, who does not speak any word in Hebrew, and just like his father, has a very accentuated French mannerisms. So this is her family, but she is Israeli. She is very Israeli, and to the extent that she can sometimes negate her being Israeli. Reut has her eyes always like directed towards the foreign. So she's in France for the past 20 years. And we have at the beginning of the novel an important dinner party that Jean-Claude, her husband, throws in the honor of a special guest named Michael Grigoriev, who is a very important author. And through this dinner, we can have a peek on the surface life that she has, very, very privileged life, but also to her inner struggle to be an Israeli, to demand herself constant joy almost. The question that keeps not being said directly in the novel is why am I not happy? And can I or can I not be the French hostess, the perfect hostess? So, and this novel I will finish here is called Where I Am, and it is a geographical journey that we go through Paris, and then we see Reut on her way to Puglia, which is a region in South Italy, very beautiful for everyone who did not went there. So it's a physical journey, but also an emotional journey of Reut becoming aware of her inner struggles and her crisis of identity. So, David, this is more or less.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. We got a question. I'm hearing the same thing. It may be your your ear pods. Is there a way your speaking is a little bit muffled? A little bit. You're not attached by wire though. I don't know if Go ahead. Try again.
Let's go back to the 90s.
Oh, much better. Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing what a wire will do. So good.
Oh no, so I hope you could listen to this long introduction. I'm sorry for whoever struggles.
No. I mean, well, yes, but I would thank the person who asked that we saw if we could correct. No, that's actually much better. Okay, so you've got a selection that you had chosen. You want to read that, or?
I would love that. I have two excerpts. If you want, I can begin with the first one. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's much better for us to be able to hear it clearly. So go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, I will speak also with a lot of intention. I will try. So the first excerpt I will read for you. We are heading towards the end of the dinner, and Julian came back home to say hello to the guests as he promised. And I give you a pic of the dialogue that Reut had with her son, and that I will not say it further. Let's begin. So Julian sat up and in a monotone started to bring his mother up to date on his different activities, focusing on his academic assignments. Reut listened at first, trying to train her entire being on her son. But she soon found herself battling to concentrate. Without even noticing, her attention began to wander from the words he said to his tone of voice, or to be exact, to Julian's oh so French inflection. This was not the first time she'd noticed it, but each time it surprised her anew. In these moments, all she could hear was a foreign melody, an unending tale woven by a man with an impeccable Parisian accent, who just so happened to be her son, but could have just as easily been a stranger. Sometimes, Julien sounded to her like a Truffaut film character. Other times, when she listened in on his social interactions, he seemed to play in unnatural word games, creating mutations out of a very language that she had worked so hard to learn and internalize. Either way, Reut couldn't help but be impressed by the lightness with which the words tumbled from his mouth, the spontaneity, the way in which they preceded or at least overlapped with his thoughts. Reut listened to him, her son who thought in French, loved in French, laughed in French, and heard in French. All those realities that were never truly clear to her. An insurmountable barrier divided her and Julien, aspects of his soul that were beyond her. So this was the first excerpt, and just a tiny bit afterwards, we have Reut alone in the kitchen, and we enter into her inner thoughts. Alone in the kitchen, Reut returned to the stove and relit the burner. She fixed her eyes on the coffee that was warming up a second time, letting it imbue her with calm. Oh, how Reut loved the sight of the thick foam on top of the Turkish coffee and its powerful aroma. The wonderful scent of cooked cardamom. When the coffee was hot enough, Reut placed the pot on a wooden tray, leaned in, and inhaled with pleasure. This was a ritual she'd repeated for as long as she could remember. She'd adopted it from her father, whom she used to help make coffee every Saturday morning. When Reut moved to Paris, she'd brought the ritual with her. Jean-Claude appreciated it too, but I was sorry to find that within a few years, she neglected the habit. The reason Reut offered: lack of time and necessary energy. The reason she kept for herself: the caffeinated aroma spurred a sense of melancholy and longing for Israel. But what did she have to long for? Every time she visited Israel, she was reminded of how unhappy she used to be there and how she sought relief from its explicit public tension, along with the censorious private tension within her family. Sometimes Reut thought she must just miss her own childhood, that animalistic sense of belonging without judgment that she used to feel within her surroundings.
Beautiful, thank you. Well, I'm going to join you on the screen since we're going to have a conversation. Let me see, add spotlight. There we are. Okay. Let me begin with a question I hadn't even known I was going to ask until a minute ago, as you were reading the first excerpt. Of course, the Reut is a translator, and you yourself are a translator. So you appreciate deeply the difficulties with translation and the way translation, no matter how good a translator is, a translation affects in profound ways what was translated, right? It is no longer quite the same thing. So as I sat, and others may have experienced this, listening to you read, just as it would be evident if I were reading a French translation of something, or a Hebrew translation of something I've written, if I were reading it in Hebrew, it would be evident that Hebrew is not my first language, right? It is also evident that English is not your first language, right? Because, right, you've got an accent that gives it away immediately. So it's a very funny thing. We are listening to English reflect upon the sound, the music, the inflection of the French for a Hebrew speaker. It's that outsideness that you were describing the experience of there. How much more complicated would this be if we were reading the same pages in your Hebrew original? In other words, right, it's the Hebrew original, right, the head of the Israeli listening to her son in his impeccable Parisian French. Does the translation to English lose something? What's the difference between hearing that reflection in English translation as opposed to the Hebrew original?
Great question that keeps occupying me, in fact, as a translator. And I must say that I find it a huge difference between Hebrew and English, insurmountable gap, which is due, in fact, to the musical aspect. Also, let's say, Hebrew, for whoever of you that learned a bit, the beauty of it, in my eyes, is the way that you can really shorten words. Each word can be conjugated almost. So sometimes the choice of a word can completely influence how it sounds, the structure, and it's much shorter. So when you take it, when you translate it into English, which Yarden Greenspan did a marvelous job, it is a challenge because you stretch it, and then the phrase can sound very heavy. So this is to begin with. And then in my novel, I think that what cannot be transmitted into English is the way I wrote it, in fact, that was not completely, let's say, usual. It was not written in a usual Hebrew, the one you, and why? Because I had this force, let's say, that made me start writing the novel when I came back from Paris, and after I spent a lot of time reading only French novels, French books. I had a big mission to read all of the beautiful prose that I haven't read all throughout my childhood. And then the phrases and the way I constructed it was very influenced by the French language. They have a lot of funny things with 2 points. I'm tired, 2 points, let's go. It's very odd. So it really infiltrated my Hebrew, and then in English, that aspect had vanished. So.
Okay, wow. I have to go. I told you I was disappointed that I hadn't gotten the Hebrew first, but I'm going to go back and get that. I want to here just say for listeners that your second excerpt very directly about the experience of distance from Israel. I do want to emphasize that explicitly, at least, there's very little on that theme in the book as a whole. Right, you can read through the book and pick up those several mentions, but people shouldn't imagine that is the central focus of the book, again, explicitly at least. It's a very human book, right, in the broadest sense. And one of the things I want to congratulate you on is bringing forward what most authors do not, and that is the importance of the experience of the bathroom, of the privy, in human life. There are several very, very important scenes in the book of Reut and her experience in the bathroom. The fact that our intestines speak to us, right? We experience our emotions often through our intestines, and that leads to certain trips. Most authors don't make that as explicit as you have. Even the horror of the public bathroom on the train, which is a very, very important sequence. So tell us a little bit about if you had any consciousnesses of decision with that, but reflecting on the human experience of our guts and the way our guts are an important part of our experience.
Thank you for that question. Yes, in fact, there were some people that were surprised by these scenes, which I in fact chose to write very deliberately, because they, in my eyes, they really serve what I wanted to express when I described the Reut emotional journey, and they're integral in order to understand Reut. And why so? Because for whoever read the book, you might you might also sense this strong anxiety that she feels all throughout the novel, and an anxiety that she's not aware of. So our body most likely communicates with us and signals us our inner state, and sometimes we ignore it. Mostly we tend to ignore it. So the scenes in the bathrooms were the only place where Reut felt that she could be herself almost. She was so tense with the guests, and then she goes into the bathroom, and then there are some parts when she needs to pee, she urinate, and it just does not come. She cannot let go. So her not being able to let go also mirrors with her inner emotional state. And there is a part in the coffee shop in the brasserie that she works so hard on the translation, and she's so exhausted, and she lifts her head and she sees people, and she doesn't want any conversation, and she's so almost afraid of her surroundings. And then she goes to the bathrooms, where finally she says, I'm free to stretch my body, to feel liberated. And it's a horrible feeling to have only the bathroom as this place. And then she puts her toilet papers one by one in order, and then it falls down, and I paralyze this terrible thing that happened to her, like the game when you put with the bricks, that you put one bricks over
Jenga.
another, Jenga, and then one goes, and how can you start again? It was this moment was much more dramatic to her. She's so tired. So and yeah, and you also mentioned at the beginning, you talked about the absence. Should I refer to it now? Or?
I'm sure that's fine. I mean, let me just expand it a little bit.
Yes.
I mentioned, but it hadn't occurred to me. Yeah, I mean, this takes place. All of human life takes place in places, right? I mean, you are sitting where you are sitting. I'm sitting in my office at the Jewish Theological Seminary, right? We are embodied. We take up place, and we are found in places. That's inevitable. We can't escape that. But places might be more or less powerful, more or less marked, either explicitly or by implication. So this takes place in Paris, which is a very, very romantic place to many, many people around the world. It's one of I mean, there are more people who visit Paris, I think, than any other place in the entire world, if I'm remembering my statistics correctly. And then you made mention of the beauty of Puglia in southern Italy, extraordinarily beautiful place. Those are the two explicit places. But then coming back to your title, where I am, right, I hear the echo of where I am not. And you made mention of that very briefly in the section that you read. Israel also comes up in a sort of contentious and provocative way in the scene of Reut in the taxi on her way to the airport with a Palestinian driver, I think it is, yes?
Turkish. Yeah.
Oh, that's right, Turkish, but Arab. That's right. But with reference to, Jews as opposed to Israelis, and that all. I mean, there it could not be any more explicit. So, and she is living in not only a diaspora, but she's living as an Israeli in a diaspora, and therefore part of what many people may not even know quite yet to identify, that is to say, an Israeli diaspora, right? And there genuinely is an Israeli diaspora. So all of those things are very complicated and very much a part of both what you say and by omission what you are hinting at. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, wow. So many thoughts. Completely. If I would need to say what is this book about in hindsight, even I was not even aware of it when I was writing it. It was such a part of me, also to write about an Israeli in the diaspora. This book is not autobiographic, but it does reflect my past experiences as a traveler in Europe. I spent many years in Paris, in Geneva, in China. So I know what is being in a taxi and to be asked, where are you from? And having this moment of, what should I say? I will just say I'm Italian. It's easier. So I'm very familiar with this experience of as a Jewish in the diaspora. And now this phenomena, we can say, is bigger than it has been in a long, long time. We see big communities of Jewish in Berlin for several years already, in Los Angeles. Now, due to the political situation in Israel, many of my friends even say they are not sure if they want to come back. So it's a question. So now this novel that I wrote, who is about a woman that lives in the diaspora for so many years, I think it echoes with the situation of many Jews around the world that constantly, every day, they live with this tension of, can I, and to which grade do I want to assimilate with this foreign environment in which I'm at? Can I call it a home? And how and to which extent should I keep my Jewish identity, my Israeli identity, and how much does the Jewish identity and the Israeli identity also collide? They're the same, they're not the same. So this is regarding to the diaspora. This is a great question, David. And yes, so I chose in the book not to mention Israel explicitly. I can also say as an anecdote that in the writing process, when I sent it to my publisher in Israel, he advised me, maybe you should add some more scenes in the dinner where Reut eats the fork, not as a French woman, like Israeli, add more Israeli things, flavor into it to accentuate the comedy. And I didn't want to do that. And I really want to describe an authentic situation, more or less, of a woman that had lived for 20 years, and she so deeply wants to be a French woman, but she constantly fails. So I think that in hindsight, this novel is about a deep feeling of failure and a deep longing to find her own self. And this is the journey I describe throughout this novel. Who is she? And yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, those are very important questions. Maybe we can come back to it. As I go on with a couple more questions, I want to say to those who are following that please feel free to formulate your own questions as well. Put them in the chat, and in a little while we'll come to those. I don't want to be the only one who's asking questions here. You made quick mention at the beginning of the fact that, I mean, the dinner party, the authors, Paris, and then, of course, the trip to Italy. This all describes a very, very privileged segment of any society. So, I mean, first of all, that's something we've been sensitized to these days, right? To ask about privilege, what position do you occupy, and what are the implications of that? So I'm curious to hear about that to begin with. But what I would add to that is that when one looks at Israel, the place where this doesn't take place, right? To me, I can identify Reut as a coastal Israeli, right? And more particularly as a citizen of the country of Tel Aviv. But there are many other places in Israel where the residents don't enjoy this kind of privilege. So is there something of an echo or reflection of the dynamics and complications of Israeli society that are lived out here in this expatriate Israeli woman?
Good question. I admit that Reut is a double privileged woman. She does not represent the majority of Israeli population. She does. I would say she's a coastal kind of a woman that enjoys life, but I think this is, I don't know what this is, but I think this phenomenon of people that live privileged life and are unhappy, or they have too much time to think, as my father would say, is something that is shared by many people, because in fact the wine and the good food is just not enough, and it is, as Julie, a person with whom Reut has a conversation with in the airplane. Julie, who chose to make Aliyah to Israel, she tells Reut that life is, her philosophy is that life is made up of difficulties, but the question is that a person should ask himself is, where and with whom do I want to have these difficulties? So it's really about choosing the place. So Reut had not found it yet, and she is very privileged. And there is a scene in the book in which she has this and she understands it suddenly, this moment of comprehension that Jean-Claude, this wonderful, intelligent man she fell in love with 20 years ago because of his foreignness, because of his great intellectual, he taught her everything there is to know about wine, everything there is to know. And this world really fascinates her, this privileged world of the French people that speaks about wines. And this is a wonderful world. I'm not being overcritical. This is it is very interesting to discuss philosophy in life and to drink wine. But then Reut finds herself completely foreign to this conversation. She does not relate to it anymore. So she dismisses this privileged life. And one last point regarding to this, I will say that a concept I mentioned very briefly in the novel that was not translated into English was a concept in economic, which is called sunk cost. And I mentioned it in Hebrew briefly, like that, in order to describe the situation in which many people find themselves, where they invest so much time in a project or standing in a line to get into the Louvre. They spent 2 hours and this line just does not move. And they know, and the dilemma that is being put is, should I get off the line and waste and get, and all of the time that I put into waiting will go into waste, or should I stay? So this is the question that Reut asks herself, I think, in this privileged world where she's at.
It's good. I mean, while you're on Jean-Claude, one of the listeners asked, is he Jewish or not? Is that part of his foreignness? And how did you make that choice?
Great question. So Jean-Claude is completely non-Jewish. He was raised Catholic, and then he left his religion and he became existentialist and atheist. This is his new religion. And Grigorev, the writer, asked, where is the challah? This is a Friday dinner. This is a shishi. Where is the challah? And Jean-Claude, like, no, which halal? No. In this house, we don't eat kosher. No kosher in this house. So not only he's not Jewish, he's very secular friend, very proud in his secular ways, and so he negates in a very blunt way, Reut Judaism.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a very good question here from one of the listeners. I'll read. It's a long question, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. All of the Jews who are living in the U.S. are living in a diaspora, some of whom feel that there is no home country from which they have been exiled. Right? This is a feeling amongst some Jews that there is a feeling amongst some Jews that Israelis living in the United States are not living in a foreign land because there's such a large and complex Jewish culture here. Is there some way you can imagine how this book would be different if the setting were New York as opposed to Paris? Wow, what a fascinating counterfactual, but great question.
Really? What is the name of the person who asked you that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just put it. Amy Davido or Davidov.
Thank you, Amy, for the question.
Me, David.
Thank you for the question. In fact, while this short time I've been spending here in the US, in Connecticut, in New York, this question had been circulating in my mind. I think that the situation of Jewish in America is quite different from what I saw, from what I understood. There is America as a symbol is a place of assimilation. People are very proud of being American, and the struggle of how do I maintain my Jewish identity in comparison to my American identity is very strong here. I would want to reflect more on this question and to think about the community of Jewish in New York. I went to the Central Synagogue recently, and I found it very fascinating. In a way, I did not recognize many of what it was very new to me. The songs were not the songs I know, and they're more you can sense the pop influences of America songs. Female rabbi was a kippah, and it's just things that I, as an Israeli Jewish, did not grow up with. So I can really see how is the Jewish community in America has so many different expressions. So I think this question is fascinating to think about it from this perspective.
And while we're on that, and this comes back to something that I said at the beginning, which actually you said to me in our conversation yesterday, which is, why this book in a book talk series of the Jewish Theological Seminary Library, which comes back to expectations that American Jews have about what a Jewish author, or in this case, more particularly an Israeli author, writes about. And, certain kinds of Jewish themes, or at least Israeli themes, and so forth. And this book confounds those expectations. So do you want to say something about that?
This book can find those
confounds.
Confound.
Confounds them. It's right.
מבלבל, like בגלל בבל, exactly. Yeah, completely. Jewish authors, I heard it from some people, are being kindly advised that if you want to have success, we should give the public what they are looking for. And it is for many in the Jewish Israeli experience is to write about Jewish or Israeli themes, write about the kibbutz, write about the political struggles. So it is either Israel or Jewish themes, which from one perspective makes sense because as readers, we are in a constant search to read about if we read about something exotic and something different from us, we would want to read it from somebody who knows it from a close experience. So writing is in many aspects should be about a close experience. But I believe that Israeli has many other things to say that are from other angles, like the angle that I chose about a woman in the diaspora. And it is I don't know if it is a shame, but there is more room to expand on it. I don't know. So now for example, the suspense books in Israel is an expanding literary realm. So the suspense, but you will not expected it from Israeli authors, right? So I believe there is a growth in that expansion in the themes we can speak about. But I think that I talk about it with Joshua Cohen. He said that any book written by a Jewish is a Jewish book. So if I write a book about a relationship between a mom and a daughter, even if they are in Timbuktu, it will be profoundly influenced by my experience as a woman that Jewish who lived in Israel. I cannot escape my identity.
Yes, none of us can. One of our listeners wants to hear a little bit more about the reason for Reut not feeling completely French. Now, I have to say, the listener offers an either-or proposition to answer that, but I'm intentionally not going to fill that in because I want to hear the complexity, of your response. You may not have either of their responses. So again, what's the reason Reut does not feel completely French?
Good question. Why does Reut not feel French? Well, French, there is a whole Torah for a French mannerism, which I think that if you did not gain it, acquired it in a young age, you will never have it in your blood, which is to never leave the table, for example, with your guests. To be very kind, to really know how to create a conversation between the guests. And I really saw it in close hand. How do you say? So it's not, I know there are good hosts in general in the world, but really French women that are the best hosts. And in a conversation, for example, Israelis, one speaks, the other speaks, okay, and there are not so many rules when you speak. Maybe I reflected on Reut, what I feel where I might have not been a good French. So in French, there is a word d'accord, which means okay. So when two people speak in French, so one will say something, and while he speaks, you will, instead of just listening to me, you will say d'accord every once in a while to make me be sure that that you are listening to me. And if you don't say it, I will say, do you listen? So there are all these sorts of more things that are not shared in the Israeli culture. So I would not even say that it's because Reut is not French or because she's Jewish, because she's Israeli. And in Israel, like I also said in the novel, you can come to a party, say hello to people, not say hello, wave, not wave. You're being very much yourself, and being yourself is like almost a religion. It's a an important value. But in the French culture, which I respect very much, you need to behave. So, and there are rules for that.
Okay.
What was his suggestions?
Well, so I mean, yes. So the expanded question offered, is it the feeling of nostalgia for Israel, or is it that the French do not embrace her completely?
I think when he said the French do not accept her completely, she might not accept them completely. It's like a dual dance that is reflect. I don't think that the French guests mind so much. They are very much in their bubble. So she just constantly feels that all of these polite codes are so foreign to her. They're very fascinating, but you look at it, but you don't enter into the screen. So this is a very tough reality to live in. And about the nostalgia for Israel, it's very conflictual, the nostalgia, how Reut experiences it, because she says it in some places, like, I miss Israel, but do I miss it? Because every time I go back there, I suffer. So I think it's a very universal state to every time you're in here to seek the other place and just feel unsatisfied. So we need to embrace what we have and to.
Well, yeah, we're going to wonder whether we like it or not. Okay, connecting to the last thing you said, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know whether this is even a comprehensible question, and it may be a very stupid question, but take it as you like. Is this novel about the Israeli future?
I don't think this question is stupid at all.
Okay. So I'll say, is this novel about the Israeli future?
It very might be possible as the current state, as now Israelis, more and more Israelis choose to leave Israel, and Israel is going deeper and deeper into a milchemet tachim, as we call it,
A fraternal war, right?
Yes, and it is very, very disturbing. It's really difficult for myself and for many of the Israelis I know. It is very disturbing, and the question is yes. Not so a long time ago, the Jewish people had a state where they can call home, and it's very paradoxical that not so many centuries passed, and yet again we are, because of inner struggles and so many political reasons that I will not mention now, we spread again, and this movement that is so characteristic of the Jewish condition is making the limits of Israel and the limits of identity feeling being completely shaken. So, but this question is interesting because I think about many Jewish that lived before the Second World War, and Victor Kleffer, for example, and who has been in the Shoah, and who really identify themselves as Europeans more than Jewish. European identity is the most important thing, and but being Jewish is being recalled by people, by the outsider. No, you are Jewish in many instances. So it's interesting that the Jewish condition, many Jews always are in this position of wanting, craving to be accepted. It's really a question about being accepted. Will they accept it to another identity? But accept it as we are, maybe, which is a very nice thing to want.
Okay, there are no more questions in the chat. I'm going to just say a couple of final words to everybody and then ask you where you recommend that they purchase the book. I told you when we met yesterday, I read the book twice in preparation for this. First of all, because I mean, it's a beautiful read. I mean, it's a joy to read, and it's not a long book, so it's possible to do that in a relatively short period of time. But I also felt that I didn't fully appreciate the book the first time I read it. And so going back and then having this conversation helps me to appreciate it far more deeply. And I will therefore turn to everybody and recommend it highly. It's, I think, really a crucial book for the now of Israeli identity and all kinds of the, the related things that we just spoke of. So if you haven't read the book, and my guess is that many of you have not yet had the opportunity, where's the best place to buy it, Dana? Just to go to your website where you've got multiple options, or?
Yes, multiple options.
Okay.
We want to choose the link and our identity. No.
Okay, so choose it, right. And you've got a new book that you've just finished. So when can we expect to be able to read that one?
I hope very soon. The book is called Spectre, and now I think in 6 months you'll be able to read it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to that too, though I'm not going to make the mistake of I'm going to read the Hebrew version of it first when that one comes. Thank you everybody for joining us. It's been really a pleasure for JTS Library to be able to sponsor these series. We've been doing it for years now, and we hope that you appreciate the choices we've made, the books, the conversations. If you know any authors that you think are writing important books that our audience might be interested in, please send them my way. I would be happy to talk to them. And in the meantime, please have a healthy and relaxing summer to the degree that your conditions permit that. And we will see you once again in the fall. And Dana, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, and for everybody who are here with me in the conversation. And yeah, you can find the book in New Vessel Press, my wonderful publishing house. So thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, David.
להתראות.
להתראות.
Bye-bye.
Hello.